So good morning, everybody. I am Jessie Whittish with Kentucky Youth Advocates. It is good to see all of you this morning. I'm so excited for this conversation around childcare today because this is a very lived experience for me these days. So just as a reminder, we'll be recording today's forum to share as a video and to share as a podcast later. So because of that, we just ask that everybody stays on mute. But if you have questions, please feel free to drop those in the chat. And panelists, you're welcome to try and address those if you want, or if not, we will circle back to folks later and get those answers to you. So with that, I am gonna turn this over to Terry Brooks, who's gonna get us started today.
All right, good morning, Jessie. Before we formally started, I listened to Sarah, Jessie, and Dawn Thompson talk about various Zoom interactions with their kids. And if they don't produce like a humorous, great moment during our broadcast today, they've blown it. So I just want to put the three of them on the spot. You better produce some entertainment for us. We have talked about childcare probably as much as any issue since we began this effort in mid-March, when we've tried to invite all of y'all to come together and think about COVID kids and families in Kentucky. That is because I'm sure you all know that childcare represents perhaps the broadest mosaic of issues. It's so important for the kid, so important for the family, so important for the economy, and it just seems like that arena it has such an interwoven nature to it. So that's why we spend a lot of time on childcare. What I would tell you is that is an impossible sector to win on if you're sitting in state government. I think I saw Terry Tolan, I know Mike Hammonds is on this call. Those are folks who have had to operate in Frankfurt in prior days. And I would guess that they, along with other folks, would agree with that. So I just want to be really clear that when Governor Beshear made his announcement on August 31st about changes to child care measures around child care providers, our assessment is that his team really worked hard at listening and crafting a common sense proposal. And sometimes common sense proposals make everybody a little hacked off and nobody totally happy. So we just need to say that from our perspective, and you certainly can disagree, that what we're working on, folks, is that good is not the enemy of perfect. So all of us have definitions of what the perfect system would be given the context of COVID. And probably nobody's 100% goals are being met, but I would not be candid and authentic with you if I didn't say that from our perspective, we think that we're moving in the right direction. Here's where we're not moving in the right direction. And that is that Frankfurt can do everything Frankfurt can do, whether that's the Republican House and Senate or the Beshear administration. And if Congress does not act and does not act in the immediate around supporting childcare, we're all up a creek that I'll let remain nameless, but you know which creek I'm talking about, right? And so the bottom line is that we want to continue to encourage you to reach out to your congressman and both of your senators and say, we can't wait. We can't wait until after the election. We can't wait for the silly season of autumn. We need you to come together, and maybe you don't solve every issue around COVID, but we have got to get help for the child care sector now, or we're going up that creek. So I just want to be really clear and declarative in our call for action. As you would guess, there is lots of info posted on the KY website. We got so many great partners who I'm sure can also offer perspective. But I really want you to hear that it's up to all of us to make that call and make that call today. So the topic at hand today is not Washington, but it's what's happening at the state level. First of all, you're going to hear from Dr. Sarah Vanover, Director of the Kentucky Division of Child Care, on those state enacted changes, the intended impact, and knowing Sarah, she's going to be comfortable talking about the conundrums they faced and how they went about solving them. So let's just be clear that wherever we are is about negotiating conundrums. After that, we're going to focus on the very important role of family child care centers, how that fits in the broader network of child care in Kentucky. We're going to be joined by June Widman, who is the Executive Director of the Appalachian Early Childhood Network, and Dawn Thompson, who is the Assistant Director for 4Cs in Louisville. So Sarah, June, and Dawn, we really appreciate you being here. As always, we appreciate all of you joining us. And again, my guess is you're going to hear this at the end, but we really, really need your voice on this topic, specifically with our federal delegation. So with this, I'm going to turn it over to Patricia Tennant, who is going to ensure that either Jesse, Dawn, or Sarah provide you with an entertaining moment with their kids, and maybe even ask some questions of substance. So Patricia.
Thank you, Terry. I might have some entertaining kids of my own, so just a heads up. Well, I'm really glad to see all of you. Welcome. And I know Terry gave a shout out to Mike Hammonds and Terry Tolan, but we'd be remiss without recognizing Susan Vessels. It's great to see you here.
Oh, I did not see that. Oh man, I'm in deep trouble. She'll show up and whip me.
So glad to see you all. And so as Terry shared, we're going to start today first with a Q&A with Sarah. And really just to give us a setting, we know there was lots of changes that happened on August 31st, but before we go there, I just wanted to recognize that, you know, none of us could have predicted this time last year that we'd be in this situation. In fact, if Congress would have allocated $3.5 billion, which is the amount that was included for childcare in the CARES Act, one of the first relief packages, we would have been ecstatic. That would have been very close to what we needed for the sector. But now with the pandemic and the massive threat that it poses to our childcare infrastructure, that amount was helpful, but not nearly enough. Sarah, I think it's safe to say that you have found yourself in a hot seat, faced with some pretty big challenges. But the good news is that you not only have the education and training, including a PhD in the field, but what many of the folks on the call might not know is that you started it in the classroom, and you have experience there and a real passion for the childcare. And so could you start us off just by giving everyone a sense of your background? How did you find yourself in this position, in this seat? And why are you passionate about it?
Well, thank you so much for having me here today. I appreciate it. You know, I started off in an early childhood classroom 22 years ago this past summer, the summer of 1998. And I started in an infant classroom at the KinderCare on UK's campus. And it was a summer job, and I thought, you know, this is a good place. I like kids. I babysat in high school. The same place that a lot of our childcare providers start. I like kids. This is great. This will be perfect. Not knowing at all what hard work was involved in that, in a classroom full of 8 infants. And you know, during my time in the classroom, I've worked pretty much with every age group that is in childcare programs. After I finished my undergrad in early childhood education, I worked in a Montessori preschool, and then moved on to public school preschool for children with special needs. After years in the classroom, I moved on to my first director position, and it was a small director position. I had 15 staff members and a small star-rated program, and it was different. They don't tell you when you get a degree in education, they don't tell you that you're expected to know how to run a business as a director. And our field seems to think that the best teachers automatically need to be promoted to directors, but they don't tell you about marketing and writing a budget and staff evaluations and all these things that come with it. So a lot of that I learned on my feet, how to work in this small church childcare program. I went on to eventually manage a center that had 85 employees and a much larger staff. It was a 5-star rated program and NACE accredited, and it was an amazing program that worked with children with and without special needs. This is not my first time working at the state. I did years ago work for the Division of Child Care as a training specialist, and I've been doing early childhood training in the field since before I graduated from UK, because I've loved working with other teachers and providers and helping them learn. I got indoctrinated into the Head Start world as a Head Start coach, which is so much learning, so many policies and procedures that you learn about, and gave me a great perspective on best practices. And I also have had the opportunity to be a professor at EKU, teaching early childhood education classes and getting to train new teachers that were going out into the field excited and hopeful about the kids that they would get to work with and make an impact in their lives. Many of my colleagues at the state have worked in different areas throughout their field. Maybe they worked in child welfare for a little while, and then they worked in behavioral health or different areas. But for me, the only field I've ever wanted to work in was early childhood education. I have a passion for working with kids from 0 to 5. I will say I'm a little scared of the school age kids. Now I'm living with 2 school age kids. I've got a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old at home, and they scare me even more. But my passion has been 0 to 5 my whole career. And I did get a doctorate, as Patricia said, and I got it in educational policy, which, when I first started my career, I thought I would never leave the classroom. So educational policy is kind of a strange way to go, all these years later. But I thought that well-written policy can help so many kids. As a teacher, I worked with 20 kids in a classroom, maybe in preschool. As a director, I could work with up to, 200 and have an impact on them. But working at the state level and working with policy has given me an opportunity to help our centers throughout the state, over 2,000 early child care programs, to make sure that they have a healthy and safe environment and that kids are ready for school. And, to me, it's not a job, it's a career and it's a mission. And I don't have any intention of leaving the field of early childhood. Now, I will say that the past 6 months have created challenges that I never anticipated in my career. And I've been in so many situations where I wanted to turn and say, okay, so who's in charge and can fix this? And then I turn back to myself and think, crud, this is my job to try and problem solve through some of these things. And, for me also, watching our child care providers struggle has been extremely emotional. I've been there, and I know how hard it is to make a budget meet ends in the best of circumstances. Childcare is not really a for-profit industry. If you can meet your bills and cover your costs, then you are a successful childcare program. And with the exacerbated situation of COVID and limited class sizes or closures, or families that are pulling their children out because they're nervous about them being in group childcare until there's a vaccine. There's so many factors that are involved, and I know that our providers have struggled. They want the best for the kids. They want to keep them healthy and safe. I know that, but they also want to make sure that their business is there to care for the kids long term. And like Terry said, it's brought a bunch of conundrums. Yeah. We're trying to balance the health and safety needs of the kids and the teachers. The teachers, in a lot of ways, are more at risk, and we don't want to put our amazing early childhood professionals at risk of getting sick. Right. We also want to make sure that childcare is there not just in 3 months, but in a year, in 5 years, in 20 years, and that we have this infrastructure that will keep the state up and running. Because childcare is the industry that supports all other industries. So we have to keep that in place so that we can continue to have families with jobs that support their children and an economy that's functioning. And, you know, for me, it's very interesting to see a field that so often has been overlooked. I've fought so hard in my career to make sure people know that I am an early childhood professional and that I'm not a nursery school teacher or things like that. And now all of a sudden, many people are depending on us and starting to understand how important our field is. But it's also at this pivotal time. So there has been, you know, for me, there's been a lot of years in the field, and there's been a lot of heart strain during this past 6 months, because I know that the kind of struggles that our providers are going through, and it's very hard for any of us, for the governor, for the secretary of the cabinet, for myself, to make decisions that will benefit everyone and still keep everyone healthy and safe.
Yeah. Yes. It's quite a job. No one, I don't think anybody could argue. These are some really tough decisions. And it sounds like, you know, you bring the experience, the education, and you're the right person for the job, Sarah. It sounds to me. And so when you talked about, you know, I didn't realize that your doctorate was in educational policy, so that makes it even more. So talk to us a little bit about, you had to make some policy choices on August 31st, kind of, and, you know, to me, the things that stood out, one, you know, group size, that was a big decision to make in terms of that has an impact on health and safety, but also business viability. The stipends for family childcare, we were very excited to see. There was also some changes related to limited duration centers. So give us kind of, you know, not everyone on this call knows the childcare sector as deeply as you do. So kind of give us an overview for advocates. What are the big things that changes that were made, and kind of what are the conundrums, and how did you land where you did?
Well, group size was one of the first issues, and we had initially reopened childcare with a maximum group size of 10 children in classrooms. And that was a starting point that we had seen a lot of other states use. We had used those informal group sizes of 10 in lots of different ways in Kentucky. And it was just a starting point where we thought, okay, we need to see, with all these additional health and safety measures, if we can keep children healthy and safe in these small groups. And so one of the things that I have done very continuously throughout this break is watch other states. We have lots of different advocacy organizations and policy organizations nationwide, like Childcare Aware of America and the Hunt Institute, that are posting everybody's different ratios and group sizes. And so I've watched a lot of those as states have changed, and I've reached out to their state administrators that have my position in their states and said, okay, you know, Connecticut, when you decided to move from 10 to 14, why did you do that, and how successful was it? One question we asked a lot of the states is, when you moved up, did you see significant outbreaks? So if you moved from a group size of 10 to a group size of 15, how did the numbers reflect in the cases that were diagnosed in staff members and the cases that were diagnosed in children? And then we also looked at states that had even higher capacities and said, how were your outbreaks? And we saw states that had significant outbreaks, both for children and adults. And we said, okay, we're not quite ready to be at that point yet. But we did see states that had been able to balance that group size of 14 and 15 and without having significant outbreaks. And the health department reports showed that with the health and safety measures, they were able to control that. And so that's where we looked at that increase. And we looked at it, like you said, business viability for the childcare providers was a driving force, but also parents that were desperately needing childcare. And with the public schools meeting virtually, we also had a need that we had all these school-age children that typically did not need childcare. That were typically in elementary school during that time period. And we wanted to make sure that more of them had the opportunity to find a healthy and safe environment if their parents were not working from home. And so a lot of those factors went into that. Now the family child care home piece, it factors into that, but it's part of like a larger plan in general. Since 2013, back when we had a significant freeze in subsidy dollars, we have lost a significant amount of family child care homes throughout Kentucky. And there's lots of different reasons for that. One predominant reason is that a lot of the child care providers that did that in their homes have been retiring from the field, and nobody has been replacing them. Other have been costs, business training was needed to be a viable business, things like that. And so we've seen that decrease, and a lot of that has really impacted our more rural areas, particularly in western and eastern Kentucky, where we have childcare deserts. Centers don't thrive there as well because families are spaced so far apart and they don't want to travel long distances in order to get to a center. So family childcare homes have been a safe source of care in those areas. We know that care is going on. Unregulated care is going on where background checks aren't happening, where home inspections aren't happening. So one of the things that we did with that stipend to start up family childcare homes is to try and encourage those providers to become regulated. You know, become a certified provider. We're going to give you this money for your startup funds to buy yourself a computer, to get safety gates and plug covers, to pay your initial insurance premium, to pay your zoning fees, and you can get set up and go through the process of being regulated and continue to be regulated throughout this process. And then those small groups where a home provider might have up to 10 children also are a benefit right now because it is a smaller group care setting where the centers have to worry more about those large group settings and spread back and forth. But the home groups and the smaller groups, they have a benefit during the pandemic, but our real reasoning is a long-term benefit. We need those childcare homes, those family childcare homes back in the childcare deserts. We need night and weekend care, which most centers don't provide. Centers usually provide care from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. or some adaptation of that. And family childcare homes do a lot of the evening care, overnight care, weekend care. And a lot of our first responders really need that right now. They've been working so much to help with the pandemic, but they might not have care if they work second or third shift. So that was also a piece of the puzzle. And then there were changes to the LDCs. So the LDCs were initially started when the child care programs closed because we wanted to make sure that our emergency responders and essential employees had the care that they needed. However, once the centers reopened, the LDCs had a small transition time in order to help find permanent child care placements for those kids. We didn't want to close them the same day that child care reopened because all those hospital staff members and EMTs, firefighters, they needed to find a way to transition their child back to a child care program, or if the child care program they had been in wasn't reopening, they had to find somewhere else. So we gave them that time period, but during that time, they remained at a higher group size than the regulated programs that Kentucky depends on so much. And so the changes on August 31st, first of all, they were lining up the LDCs with the ratios, the masking, the background checks, everything that a regulated licensed center would have to adhere to. We also had a large number of programs spring up to support NTI children. Organizations that had previously been licensing exempt, like single subject programs like karate, after school programs, or gymnastics, they had always been able to operate as a single subject program without any type of regulation. But they wanted to add an NTI component and care for those children, so they needed to be on a path to be licensed. So we gave them an opportunity to be a new LDC, to follow the requirements as far as the group size, the background checks, the masking, and they have a 90-day time period to get licensed. But we also wanted to take into account that parents are desperately looking for childcare everywhere right now because of the public schools only being virtual. So we didn't want to yank care away from families that were trying to do everything they possibly could to keep their jobs, support their family. Mm-hmm. So our Division of Regulated Childcare has been reaching out to those LDCs. They're giving them that 90-day time period, but they're also explaining to them that this is what's going to be expected of you. At the end of this 90 days, you need to become licensed. And this is what that means. Uh-huh. Are you willing to do this? Yeah. Get on board.
And I should, for everyone, LDC stands for Limited Duration Centers. That's the acronym using there. Sarah, when it comes to parents and when they're thinking about, trying to juggle work, children's schooling, and childcare, and looking for options, what are some factors that they should be considering when it comes to health and safety? What does it mean to be licensed? Help parents kind of understand the importance there.
Well, one of the main things as a parent of young children myself that I want to know is that the staff members have had background checks. Any type of regulated childcare, there are mandatory background checks in place so that you know that that is a safe adult to leave your children with. Or if it's a family childcare home, the other adults in the home have also been background checked and they are safe adults to be around as well. If you're going to a sitter or doing some kind of educational pod and you don't know the background of the person that you're leaving your child with, that can have significant safety risks. And we really want to encourage parents to ask some of these tough questions. Do you have a background check? Are you regulated? Many parents may not know if the program is regulated or not. And so just starting off by asking, are you regulated? Are you a registered or certified provider? Does the state inspect your facility? Do you have background checks? You know, other things we want to ask about right now are the cleaning procedures that are in place and how they're making sure that that environment stays healthy and safe. The state regulated programs have some very stringent cleaning protocol right now to make sure that the virus is not passed back and forth from child to child. And if the program isn't regulated, they may not have those types of stringent cleaning processes. And so that's going to be essential as well as masking and, you know, the PPE and things like that. We also want to think about things like if the provider has worked with children before, if they know how to work with different age groups, safe policies, like if you have an infant you're leaving in care, do they know about safe sleep? Do they know how to take care of those children? So there's a lot of health and safety procedures that definitely have to be addressed up front before you ever leave your child with another adult. Of course, family, friend, and neighbor care is a staple throughout the state, and that's fabulous if you have family that can back you up. I don't have family in my area, so my children, I have to ask all these questions of people that aren't related to me, and that I need to find out if they are a certified family child care home or licensed child care, how they keep my children safe, are the teachers qualified to be in there, do they have clean background checks, and then how are they helping them to have a developmentally appropriate environment? Are they expecting things of children that are appropriate for their age? You know, are they trying to toilet train a 1-year-old and then getting upset with them if they don't meet those expectations, because that mark may be very, very high for a child that age? Or have they worked, how do they, if they're a family child care home and they have multiple ages, how do they work with all those children in different ages in the same home so that children stay healthy and safe throughout that time period? So there's definitely an emphasis on health and safety right now, but I'd say that quality care and lots of language interaction is still very, very important. How do they interact with your child? How do they talk to them? Are there back and forth conversations? Is there a loving, nurturing environment? All those things really matter when you're selecting who's going to care for your child when you have to be away from them.
Yeah, thank you. So I guess now we've got 2 minutes left. And so I have kind of 2 questions. One is, can you give us an update on that stipend for family childcare? Do you have a timeline now for how, you know, I know the announcement was made and now you're working on the particulars of the rollout.
Yes.
Wondering if you have any updates then now on when centers can apply. And then I just invite you to kind of give closing comments on what's the biggest takeaway you hope advocates take today.
We do have a process in place for that right now. We're finalizing a contract, but what we're looking at is people who want to apply for the $2,500 will contact the Division of Child Care and ask for the head of our quality enhancement branch, who is Calvania Radford, and she'll be coordinating all of that. But you can also just call the division and ask to be connected to get that information. It will be a process where we give you the money in advance. You don't have to upfront it and be reimbursed. It will go towards the provider's home. Some child care providers, regulated child care providers, can care for a child in the child's home, but this money will go only if you are caring for children in your home. And again, it has to be related to those startup expenses, and we do ask that the provider cares for children for a calendar year if they accept that. And so there'll be kind of a small contractual, it's a grant basically, but you're signing off saying that if I take this money, then these are the things that I'm going to use it for, and just keep your receipts on hand. And then that funding will be released to you to start that up. And you will go through the Division of Regulated Child Care to go through the certification process. And if you want to become registered, you'll go through the Division of Child Care through our office. But we can help you meet up with the people that you need to in that effort. But you know, we're getting names now, and we're getting those contracts ready. So people that are ready to do that, we want to hear from you. As far as takeaway goes, everybody has been learning through this last 6 months. You know, we're trying to figure out the best way to support children and families, and we're making changes as we learn. You know, we're reevaluating every month and looking at, okay, this has worked so far. We're collecting data. We're sitting down and looking at it and saying, now where do we need to go now? One of the biggest things that we have to remember is that this is not a short-term process. Restabilizing childcare is going to take some time. Everything's not going to be back to the way it was in 6 months, but our goal is to stick with our providers and help them to stabilize over the next year, 18 months, 2 years. We're trying to make this a long haul situation and to support them. And as soon as we have the ability to reevaluate regulations and open things up more, because we know that kids will be safe, infection rates have dropped, then we're going to do that. We're going to continue to try and meet the best needs of the children and the best needs of the centers, and to balance that through the whole time. And we are going to reevaluate throughout that process. So nothing is set in stone and finished. And just keep that in mind as providers say, but now we need this, now we need that. It's not finished. We're going to continue to work with you and support you until we can get to a place where everybody feels comfortable again.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. And I know I speak on behalf of many on this Zoom call today, and what I've heard is just, it's a new era of kind of that transparency and openness, that working with providers. I think you've really modeled what that should be looking like. How I think it's safe to say in the past, we haven't had that same level of openness and flexibility and willingness to listen. And so we really appreciate that, Sarah. And kudos to you. Thank you for sticking it out in a tough situation. And we really appreciate it. Okay. So now I'm going to then open it up to our panel. We've got three folks with us today. I think we missed one, Terry, earlier, a great last addition. So we've got June Widman, who is the Executive Director of the Appalachian Early Childhood Network. Dawn Thompson, who is the Assistant Director at Community Coordinated Childcare 4C here in Louisville, and Kathy King, who is also with 4C in Louisville. And so now I'd like to have each of you just take a minute or two to introduce yourself, tell us what's your role, and especially what's your connection to family childcare, and why are you passionate about it? Jane, you want to start us off?
I'll start. So, as Patricia mentioned, I'm June Widman with the Appalachian Early Childhood Network. And for those of you who have known me a long time, you're probably saying, wait a minute, what happened to Eastern Kentucky Child Care Coalition? That was the organization that I helped found back in 1990. So I've been at this for quite a while. Even though my formal education is in agriculture, I've been associated with the field of early care and education since 1982, working for the Christian Appalachian Project at that time. As we, as an organization, kind of dove in a little more deeply to the kinds of things that were impacting families in our region, we began to see that it was just so difficult to establish childcare programs in areas, as Sarah mentioned, where the population was a little more scattered, and where the ability to pay for childcare was more difficult because of suppressed wages. And so one of the things we recognized, along with folks from other agencies throughout the state, was a need for family childcare in a way that we weren't seeing at that time. In the early 80s, really throughout the 80s, the only option for family childcare was to be licensed. And to be licensed meant really just about meeting all the qualifications of a childcare center, but to be able to do it in your home. And so we worked hard on looking at creating a smaller form of family childcare that would suit our region as well as other places throughout the Commonwealth. And so in some fashion or another, the organization that I helped create in 1990 and the one I continued to be associated with for all those many years saw family childcare as a focus, a need, and an answer to go along with the really important need for childcare in general. So we saw working with centers and working with family childcare as part of the fabric of what was needed to support families in our region for all those many years.
Great, thank you. Dawn, you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Dawn Thompson, and I am the Assistant Director at Community Coordinated Childcare in Louisville. I have been working with childcare providers for over 20 years now as part of the Childcare Assistance Program or part of the Child and Adult Care Food Program. Most recently, I've been working with family childcare providers as part of the Pritchard Community's Quality Family Childcare in Kentucky pilot program. We refer to it as the Kellogg Grant, so I get the actual name of it confused and have to look at the notes there for that piece. But that program has really focused on increasing the availability of family childcare here in Kentucky. And that, like Sarah said earlier, is just really on the decline and has been for many years. And COVID has really hurt us in that realm. It has not been kind to us. We're seeing more providers retire quicker than ever, and so we're hurting as far as our family child care providers. In the urban areas, June said that there was a need for family child care providers in the rural areas. We have availability of child care providers, but our family child care home providers really serve a special function in the urban areas because they speak to the needs of our families that are looking for non-traditional care or need a little bit of flexibility. Maybe their work schedules don't exactly meet the hours of centers who are open 6 to 6. So those schedules are a little more flexible. Some families prefer to have their sibling groups together. And this allows, family child care allows those sibling groups to be together in one space instead of separated in a center. So there are some very specific needs of family child care homes that serve a purpose in the urban areas as well. And so we want to continue to build those up and see those increase in our areas. And so we have been working to do that as well. So we hope to continue to see those grow.
Excellent. Thanks. And that was actually, I'm glad you spelled that out. I think many of us think of the childcare as that brick and mortar center, but that is not really the reality of the infrastructure in childcare in Kentucky of how it's delivered. And so that's helpful. I think we all need to better understand that important and unique role that family childcare plays. And Kathy, next to you, tell us about what you do at 4C and your role with family childcare.
Okay, I've been with 4C for 24 years. I don't know where my former boss went. I saw her a minute ago, Susan Vessels. So for 17 of those years, I was in our Lincoln Trail office before that closed, so I know a little bit about the rural piece too. But currently, the project that Dawn mentioned, the Kellogg project, I'm working with a group of Spanish-speaking providers, and we've had COPs, community of practice. It's a specific form of professional development for childcare programs and for family childcare providers. It allows that peer-to-peer learning that's so valuable and is way better than us just dumping knowledge in somebody's head. So this particular group, there's 12 of them, and they all speak Spanish. We've had an interpreter who's wonderful. And they have many of the same challenges that other family child care providers do, but of course that one big barrier of the language. I will say, DCC, thank you for so many forms that you've translated recently into Spanish. That's been so helpful. But for them during this pandemic, I think they were just, because of the language barrier for one, they weren't really sure. They kept kind of reaching out. So did the governor say we could open now, or do we have to wait? So I think they're just a special group that we really want to keep and grow if possible. And they do fill a really great need in our community for Spanish-speaking families.
Great. I think next I just want to kind of cut to the chase with you all and hear from you I think many, it's safe to say, were maybe surprised by the announcement about the stipend for family childcare. How did you feel about it when you heard about it? But also, should you all also worked with your brick and mortar licensed childcare centers? Should they feel threatened by this? Is it, choosing one type of care over the other? What is there a role for family childcare to also collaborate with your type 1 childcare centers? And I'm going to leave that open. Whoever wants to take it first.
I'll jump in. First of all, Patricia, I think it's important for a little bit of perspective. Sarah mentioned that, family childcare was on the decline for many years. And so I always like to use that point of reference that back in the early aughts of this century, and I'm talking about the 2000s, there were over 1,200 certified family childcare programs throughout the Commonwealth. Before COVID hit in March, there were less than 250. So I think it's really important to kind of have that perspective of, we're not talking about just a few businesses going out, right? Or a few folks retiring. We're talking about a major impact on what was available to communities. And so I think, when I looked back at what were we doing that generated interest, that got people to move from, maybe doing care in their homes like they were, not realizing that Kentucky statute said if you're caring for 4 or more children not related to you, you need to be regulated. So what kind of efforts were going on? Well, one of them was a small stipend that could help with some of that upfront cost, as well as the possibility of funding for fencing for the provider's yard to make it a safe place to play. And so those kind of incentives were really important. And somewhere along the line, the funding for that ended. And so, of course, there wasn't that kind of encouragement. So when we heard about this one, we were really thrilled, just because even just in this last little bit where we've been working with some providers, potential providers, folks who showed an interest in becoming certified and wanting to do it well, the cost of a fence was a barrier, the cost of getting the kind of crib they needed for an infant that they wanted to care for. There are just these things that a typical family doesn't just have and doesn't have the money to put into place before they start their business. So, and then just the second part of your question in terms of how that relates, why are we saying, why are we doing this for family childcare? I think, again, it's really important. We all need to step back for a moment and think about the broader perspective of childcare as an incredibly important part of the infrastructure for our communities to develop and thrive. And right now, while some places are struggling to fill slots, other places folks are struggling to find care. And it's not the typical situation. Every community is different. And so if we can kind of recognize that Sarah has to look at it from the entire Commonwealth perspective. We kind of only know our area and our situation. And if I was running a center, I would really only know my situation in the center. And so if I step back and think about all these forms of childcare are really important and really needed, and that by kind of working together at it, we are looking down the line. We are looking at what can happen. In our particular case, the work we're doing with the Kellogg grant, and I know we're not supposed to refer to it that way, but too bad. We're really looking at how a really good center in a community can end up being a anchor point for the development of family childcare programs and work together. That center only has so many slots for infants and toddlers, as well as the rest of the centers in that community. So how do we develop interest in doing that kind of care in homes, with the idea that perhaps when the child turns 3 or 4, the parent might really be interested in them being part of a group setting. And so looking at it from that perspective instead of just that single point that we tend to do.
Yeah, I agree, June. You know, the centers that are upset by this family child care home offering right now need to think that not all of these family child care homes that are going to receive this stipend are in direct competition for their slots. And I think that's how some of them feel right now. And I can understand that because they're in a very desperate situation. And so when you're in that situation, like June said, what you see is around you. But we have to keep in mind that there are some counties in Kentucky that have no childcare options. So while we have many childcare options here in Jefferson County, there's some across the state that have none. And so we have to increase those childcare options everywhere. But even here in Jefferson County, we need infant and toddler care across the board, you know, so family child care is a great way to increase that infant toddler care. But also our family child care providers, they give us some flexibilities. Like I said earlier, they give us an option to that small group setting that, you know, some parents are looking for right now. They're not going to take their child to a center regardless if that's their only option, because they're not going to take their child into a large group. They want that small group setting where they know that there's only a limited number of contacts there, because they're not comfortable taking their children into a large group because of COVID right now. Right. You know, it does allow, you know, like I said, your sibling groups to stay together. You know, it allows them to have a different relationship with that family child care provider. So it's a great opportunity. We were super excited to hear it because it's a support that we have been missing for a very long time. And it's a support that's very needed. That it's expensive to become certified, and especially on the front end when you're not bringing in any income. So if you have several folks in your home and you need to do background checks for everybody, that's a lot of money out front before you're earning income. So that's great for the state to put that money out front to help you become certified. I think we can definitely entice some people to step into the field that way. But you know, I really encourage those folks that are upset by the fact that we're offering this to family child care homes to think about it as not direct competition, but bringing some more people into the child care industry, like June said, as some of those infant toddler slots, fill those up. And then when parents, as they get to 3 or 4 years old, they think that they want their children to be in a center setting, that they will move them into a larger group setting. It really does kind of, you know, kind of work that way. So it's not exactly a direct competition for slots.
Right. Yeah. And I know that also, you know, infant toddler care is the most expensive, isn't it? And so for centers, often they're 3 and 4 year olds, those classrooms help support even the ability to keep an infant toddler classroom open. So Kathy, I'd love to hear from you a little bit more about your group and the pilot with the families. And from, I don't know, were you able to gather a sense of why did families choose care with the providers that you served, and also give us a kind of a picture of them. What were some of, maybe, I think you'd already mentioned the language barrier was a challenge, but were there other unique challenges? What were the unique strengths also that they brought?
Gosh, I hope I can remember everything you asked me. I think, as I said earlier, many families choose them because of the similarity of the culture and the language. And Dawn said yesterday, and this is true, this particular group of providers will tell you because their food's better. And honestly, I've been there at mealtime. Their food is great. If you like flan, wow. And they're also, you know, just very loving, nurturing women that want to do a really good job. Many of them are not, you know, weren't born here, had, you know, some were professors and had other high-paying jobs. And when they came here, you know, those education things don't always translate in a way that allows them to have the same career, but they do see this as a career path. It's really, it's fun to be with them because they are very passionate and very animated. And so at first I was like, oh gosh, I think I've upset people, but no, they're just really happy. We gave them some, one time we gave them some children's book in Spanish, and they were, you know, just kind of over the top with it, which is so refreshing. They really care about what they do. They have a lot of questions, I think, about taxes. some women that came from Cuba, there's a different system there for when a person is able to retire than here. You know, there's Social Security. They were kind of unaware of that, and some of them that are older were a little unprepared. So we were able to have a tax person come in and explain that to them and how they can kind of get on track with that and be okay by the time they retire. But I think they really, just like other providers in the state, this is their passion. They love the children they serve. They care for the families. The families that they care for become their family. And then those of us that get to work with them, we become family too, because by the time we were able to go visit them in their homes pre-pandemic to do just a short family child care rating scale, you know, we were getting hugs and kisses and all kinds of stuff when we got there. So that's just kind of a unexpected bonus from that group. Did I answer everything you asked me?
You did.
Okay.
And the big takeaway is, for me, I think, is families need a good range of childcare options. And that, you know, even within, we know over half of Kentuckians are in a childcare desert, and we often think of, you know, that challenge and that role that family childcare can play, particularly in rural areas, but also in our urban areas. You know, we need to think about, you know, that options differ based on race and ethnicity and your income level as well. And so we need to make sure we've got access to a wide variety of options that are going to meet the needs of families. So thank you for that. So I guess the last question, we've got Sarah here still, our policy expert, and the person who's got her finger on the ability to move policy. So I'd love to hear from the three of you on, you know, beyond these stipends, are there other policy choices that we think would be important for supporting family childcare and building up our what we've lost? I think if we could get back to, June, did you say 1,400?
1,200.
1,200 providers.
Mm-hmm.
What would it take? And how could Frankfurt support that? How can we as advocates support that?
I think the biggest,
Oh, go ahead, Dawn.
so sorry, Sarah. I think the biggest thing that we could do to put in policy is to remember that family childcare providers are in their homes. They are living in those homes. After their childcare closes, they still have to live there. And that is the number one thing that we hear from our family childcare providers, is that the regulations sometimes forget that they live in their homes. So while we definitely want to do everything we can to keep children safe, and we want to make sure that they are learning, we need to remember it's not a center. It's still that they are living, they have to live in those households. So, and I don't think we've crossed those lines. I don't think we're there, but just, you know, making sure we don't go there, because it's, you know, it's one of those things that's one of the struggles that they face in becoming certified.
Another issue I would say is to really change the perspective of these women that are working in these homes. You are an entrepreneur. You are a professional businesswoman running your own business within your home. Mm-hmm. And the parents need to really be aware of that too, that they're not making a lesser choice or a more informal choice, that it is still a childcare program and business, and that they're selecting a more family-oriented version of that. But these are professionals who know their stuff. They know about young children. They know about keeping them healthy and safe. And we really need a professional shift in the way that we're looking at them. You know, when the Kellogg grant started and many of our people went out to these centers to talk to them, a lot of the women, and I'm saying women because right now we don't have a gentleman in the state of Kentucky who is running a family child care home, but a lot of these women didn't feel like business people. They didn't feel like they were running a business, and they would talk to us about their insecurity with their taxes or their budgets or things like that. But they also didn't feel like they had their own business that they had created, that they were a small business owner. And some of that really needs to come into play in order to create a perspective shift and make them feel as valuable to the field as the child care centers. And if they feel as valuable to the field, then we can see an expansion in those family child care homes.
I love that.
I would just follow that up with the fact that part of what could help is a change in how we fund childcare across the board, but particularly through the Child Care Assistance Payment Program. Right now, the dependency on the market rate, which is, I know, part of how it has been presented to how we have to do it. We have to look for creative ways to our Congress folks to understand that that doesn't work. And I see it particularly in our region, where if programs increase the rates of what they're charging to parents, which is what would impact the market rate, they're going to increase themselves out of business, that there are not enough families that can support a higher rate. And so it's this sort of vicious circle, the cat chasing its tail or whatever. It's like, you know, in areas where incomes are suppressed, the need for childcare is still great, but what a center or a family child care program can recoup through child care assistance isn't enough to keep that program at a high level of quality. And so it's just going to come down to dollars. It always has, and until as a nation we wake up to the fact that this important piece of our infrastructure has got to be funded just like we would think about it once the child is old enough to enter the school program, or once we start to think about it in the same breath as what it takes to attract jobs to a community. Until we put some money behind that, we're just never going to get ourselves out of the situation that we're in, which is childcare. Any good childcare has been on the backs of the women who have been providing it instead of the community's response to making it something that it should be.
Amen.
And
Go ahead, Kathy.
I'd like to add just one last thing for those of us in the audience that train childcare providers, work with them. You know, we just have to really do remember that they need some specialized training. They probably need some additional support. Maybe it's a, network meeting, but, maybe connecting with center staff too, just find a way, because they are isolated and they are on their own. And I think that brings its own set of challenges as well.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, thank you all so much for your commitment to the field. That's super important. And I'm so glad you all have stuck with it so long, and I hope you continue. And I'm going to turn it over now to Benjamin Geese to wrap us up.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Patricia. Before I get into our closing remarks and thanking our guest, I want to take a moment to speak directly to all 50 participants who have joined us today. Dr. Brooks mentioned it at the beginning in his introduction, and we had a few of our advocates mention it here just a moment on the call. But I want to take this moment to speak directly to all 50 of you as individuals, as citizens, to say how critically important it is you take the moment today, this morning, right now, this very moment, to reach out to your member of Congress in Washington, D.C., your member of the United States House of Representatives, and our two U.S. senators, Senator Rand Paul and Senator Mitch McConnell. Right now, I am going to drop our call to action for childcare and other issues into the chat box. It was mentioned earlier. But please, if you have a moment, stop what you're doing, click on that link in the chat box. It will take you directly to our call to action. It is simply a click. It will tell you who your representatives are, and it will tell you how to best get into contact with them and how to do that automatically. It takes just a moment, and it is critically important. If you care about kids, if you know how important childcare is to children, to the economy, to the workforce, to small business owners, that you take a moment to reach out to your federal member of Congress. Right now, there are discussions ranging anywhere from $15 billion with a B dollars for childcare to $50 billion with a B dollars for childcare. As Dr. Brooks, Patricia, several others earlier in the call, if that money does not come through, we are in for a world of hurt. So please, please, please take a moment to click on that link. And with that, I'd like to transition to a little bit more light conversation to say thank you so much to all of the advocates who joined on today's call. Dr. Vanover, it's always a joy and a pleasure to work with you and to see your passion for childcare and what you're doing to serve all of the providers and children throughout the state. So again, thank you for what you're doing. We know it's not easy, but we know that you're entirely capable and that you are pushing through in the best way possible. I also want to take a moment to thank Dawn Thompson of 4C, June Widman of the Appalachian Early Childhood Network, and Kathy King, also from 4C. Thank you all so much for joining us here today. Also, I want to draw your attention to next week's panel. Next week, we will be discussing child abuse prevention, including the 10-4 bruising rule. We will be commemorating the second 10-4, meaning October the 4th, this upcoming week. And essentially, that is to draw awareness to a tool that's used to spot potential abuse on children. And so next week, our panelists will include Dr. Melissa Curry, the forensic pediatrician at the University of Louisville, and Dr. Mary Clyde Pierce, professor of emergency medicine pediatrics and preventative medicine at Northwestern University in the Feinberg School of Medicine. And she is the creator of the 10-4 bruising rule, so it'll be quite a treat to listen to her. We all play a role in keeping kids safe, so we hope that you will join us to learn more about child abuse prevention and recognition. We'll be sure to send out that RSVP link for next week's forum, along with the recording of this forum and other resources in our follow-up email. Again, just want to say thank you to everyone on the call. We look forward to seeing you again next week, and we hope that you'll take a moment to click on that link just dropped in the chat to reach out to your federal representatives in Washington. Thank you all so much and have a wonderful day.